Welcome to the College of Architecture and Design at Lawrence Technological University. And for those joining online through our YouTube channel, thanks for tuning in. Before I continue, please silence your phones. Thank you. My name is Sophie Yan. I am an assistant professor at the College of Architecture and Design, as well as the program director for interior design. Our college is united with a broad and inclusive sense of design. We offer degrees in architecture, interior design, product design, graphic design, and game design. And we seek productive overlaps between these disciplines and other degrees offered at the university. We also recently launched a new graduate degree in design and technology, which results from these overlaps. Our lecture series allows us to engage in design discussions and offer broad perspectives on where we imagine design is headed. And through this series, we're bringing visionary designers to campus to share their ideas and engage our students and faculty. So mark your calendars for the next lecture, Tuesday, April 15th at 12:30 p.m. with senior designer at ZeniMax Online Studios, Deidre Christopher. We would like to thank today's design and technology lecture sponsor, the Gensler Charitable Gift Fund. Today, Smith Group Vice President and Senior Workplace Strategist Alexis Kim is speaking about strategy, a new discipline in design and technology. At the end of the talk, we'll have time for a 15-minute Q&A session. Alexis Kim is a highly accomplished senior workplace strategist and vice president at Smith Group, with a strong background in interior architecture and change management. See us now? Okay. She has led transformative projects for top-tier clients, including Duke University, Google, Ford Motor Company, Levi Strauss and Company, Johns Hopkins, Disney, University of Michigan. The list goes on. A sought-after speaker and thought leader, Alexis has presented at industry conferences like WorkTech and NeoCon, and her insights have been featured in publications like Work Design magazine. Her expertise lies at the intersection of data-driven design and human-centric workplace strategies, driving innovation in hybrid work environments and organizational change. Please help me welcome Alexis Kim.
Thank you. Let me just do a quick check. So those joining online, I'm trying to navigate the audience here and online. Apologies if I'm looking up and down. I wanted to make sure I can engage both of you. Thank you so much for having me. I had lots of April Fool's joke ready to go, but I realized that you already had lunch, you're having lunch, and lots of other things that I just noticed and realized. So I'll just kind of skip to it. Wow, but still impressed you're spending half of your lunch hour with me, and hopefully the next hour we can I can share out with you my experiences and they have benefit to your future in some way, shape, or form, and also hopefully you can have an interesting dialogue. When Carl reached out late last year for me to speak, my first reaction was me. My second, of course, yes, I would love to. And so I embarked on a journey to prepare a lecture for you. Now, having said that, I had no communication since then with Carl about what this lecture series is about, who are the audience, what are the right engagement, what should I really talk about to make sure it's benefiting you all, the audience, none of that, which is really kind of unlike what I typically do, which is really much more research-based. But here I am today. Really, today is really about not just, I'll certainly share out what I've done in my work, which is strategy, but hopefully I'm trying to make a proposition that will help you think about what your role will be as a designer or within the design industry for the future. So full transparency, I just share with you, I didn't do any research on the audience. So what I would actually like is to do a quick poll. By poll. So those joining virtually, I apologize that you are not able to, or I'm not able to see your responses, but quick raise of hand If you're in architecture or interior design, first or second year, okay. Third year or more, senior, okay. How about other design discipline? I heard about game design. There might be industrial design, okay. And then if you're first or second year, first or third year or more, faculty, administration, okay. Any others? Okay. So this is giving me a good kind of overview on who I'm actually speaking to. Anyone bold enough to share when I say strategy, the term strategy, what it means to you or what it makes you think about? Anyone between your pizza bites?
Laying out a battle plan for either a class, a test, or any big event coming up.
I love that battle plan. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, just kind of the way you tackle any sort of problem and how you like the motions that you're gonna go through to get to the final answer.
I love that too. Great. Thank you for sharing. Anyone online? No? Okay, so let's get into this. I am going to actually walk you through and present the proposition to you by first sharing with you 3 facts, 2 predictions that will lead to why I'm proposing what I'm proposing. And it is definitely around strategy, but I truly believe that there's a value in looking at this at the intersection of design and technology, especially in the world that we live in. So bear with me and come along on this journey. The 3 facts, no joke. I know it's April Fool's. The first fact is, as what it says, pace of change. It's not just my age that I feel like every day is going by really faster, which may be true. But did you know that within the first year of pandemic, according to McKinsey, the amount of progress we made from digital transformation and technology equates to anywhere from 3 years to 7 years in the making, whether it's industry, products, solutions, or operations that every organization had to make. Now, I know that was a unique situation, pandemic, once in a lifetime, hopefully, right? But that kind of speaks to this notion of speed of change. So one of my favorite quotes that I use often, both for myself to remind myself and with clients, is this quote by Justin Trudeau, which he actually shared before the pandemic, is that the pace of change has never been this fast. But I think what's more important in his quote is that it will never be this slow again. And we may be experiencing already, and partly because the AI and technology advancement that's really pushing that envelope, right? So imagine if you've been on a roller coaster ride, very steady, you have the expectation, and all of a sudden it jumps up this way. How will you catch up? You need more speed, you need more power, you need lots of other things that will actually get you ready for that, right? So that's fact 1. Second fact, the 4th industrial revolution paired with the complexity that it's driving. So the world has never been disconnected. So we're at actually the cusp of 5th industrial revolution with integration of AI, robotics, generative AI, because we've already been in the world of AI in many aspects. So according to McKinsey, projecting 2025, artificial intelligence has potential to actually change our world as the steam engine did for 19th century industrial revolution. What is interesting, when people talk about the 5th industrial revolution, is that unlike the previous ones, it really emphasizes more human-centric approach and focusing on social values, sustainability, and well-being. And what's more interesting is it aims to create a harmonious collaboration between humans and machines that ultimately prioritize ethical and environmental considerations. So hold that thought. I'll come back to that. At the same time, our world is more connected than ever, more complex than ever through that connectedness. You may or may not realize that. This graphic here, the visualization, is one of my favorite. It's actually a data visualization tool developed by Harvard Growth Lab. It helps users to explore and understand economic dynamics, growth opportunities across the entire world. worldwide, explore global trade flows, analyze economic structure, all of these sort of things, right? But to me, the takeaway is how connected everything is, right? And how the world is so connected. And what we do here at this point now in this location affects everything else, and there's opportunity for that. When you think about, hopefully, many of the design problems you solve on campus right now in academia, hopefully you're folding in a lot of social, environmental, economical, other aspects as become part of that equation and the variable, right? So the problems we have to solve for are becoming much more complex. So the creative problems that we solve through design, there's an opportunity to really address and respond to a wider lens than and making a greater impact than just a simple solution and looking at it as a product. So that is fact 2. The third fact is around talent. You all, myself included. And it's kind of a twofold, and it could be good news or bad news. On one hand, there's certainly pressure on talent that has twofold aspect to that. One, according to U.S. Census and Bureau of Labor Statistics, and something I've been sharing with the client a lot, there has been a steady decline in labor force participation, even starting from a decade ago. And that is to be remaining for the future. What does that mean? The reduction in talent availability. So good news, companies will be looking for all of you, competing for all of you, right? At the same time, however, there's greater demand for a more sophisticated talent, meaning given the complexity of the problems we need to solve, it requires a different types of skill sets, right, in the future. According to the latest World Economic Forum, I really highly encourage you to read it for the projection for the 2025 in the future. They actually state that in the next 5 years, I'm not sure when you're graduating, on average, workers can expect almost 40% of their skill sets to be either transformed or become outdated. Wow. I may be out of job. Okay. But it also highlights the need to reskill and think about what those skill sets might be in the future. At the same time, they cite that analytical thinking as the most sought after core skill among employers. Okay, so how do we apply that? So coupled with that aspect about talent war, the advancement of AI, generative AI, I'm sure you're hearing about it ad nauseum and all across every engagement. We have a new demographic within our workforce. I have them now in my workplace environment. You will, and I'm sure you already have, and you're even studying or working on projects, digital coworker working side by side with us, right? We have architectural companies investing in generative AI to create something that will allow them to actually, by push of a button, putting in criteria and precedents and conditions that you want, spit out multiple design options already in a matter of minutes. Okay. We have computational modeling, data-driven solution. More of our clients are demanding every decision we make throughout the design process is based on data. So how do we ready ourselves in this new world? So based on those 3 facts, I like to make 2 predictions. Now, I am no full caveat, in case you haven't noticed, I'm not a futurist, I'm not a prophet or a fortune teller, but I can go by the facts that I just presented to you and have an understanding about its potential implication. Okay. So first of the 2 predictions are, there will be shift in value, meaning what we do needs to evolve. I'm not saying it will fundamentally change your role as a design or designer in any realm, but you need to continue to kind of evolve it in a way that it harnesses other skill sets. Okay, so it really needs to expand the what of the design. What does that mean? So prediction, World Economic Forum also predicted in about 5 years, there's shift in, as we talked about AI as your coworker, right? Tasks that will be done by the machine versus tasks that will be done by people and tasks that will be done together. But guess what? and this is according to AI itself, when you Google it, it actually states that AI is unlikely to fully replicate human skills. What are those skills? Creativity, emotional intelligence, how I'm connecting with you, right? Critical thinking, adaptability, complex problem solving, interpersonal skills, problem solving together, having empathy for one another, questioning, not just taking orders, right? Communication, and last but not least, strategic thinking. So when you think about these skill sets for the future that we need to really elevate above all of the other machine and robots and AI, how can we look at that and see that as a tool set that we really need to elevate in our everyday problem solving, right? So this is, I know, funny, haha, cartoon, but there's definitely more, there's a reason why there's a lot more drive about human-centric design. How do we make sure that humans are engaged and then we're actually, addressing the experiential elements? It's because all of those human factors, warm and fuzzy things, not the concrete numbers, ultimately are things that AI cannot take over. So we can actually, you see that as an opportunity to reposition ourselves. Second prediction is around shift in our role. Reimagining, we talked about the what, but how we do things, especially at the intersection of design and technology. We will need to shift our role by really realigning how we do things so that we can have a higher level of value to not only the outcome, but to the clients ultimately, or your customers that you're designing for, and have better results. How do you do that? And what does that mean? First and foremost, it's a mindset shift from I want to build something, I want to create something as a product, service, whatever it may be, game, right? Interior, exterior, built environment, whatever it may be. Changing that from that mindset to I want to problem solve, complex problem solve to reach a goal. That is a very different mindset when you tackle any project. Why? Because you want to be the orchestrator, not the widget, right? But orchestrator of pulling all of these resources and tools and technology at our fingertips to be able to come to a conclusion and a goal, meeting client's goal or your goal for that matter, in a really seamless way. Now, technology should be our partner, not a widget, as I just mentioned, and the role of technology will be integral and strategic part of activities that we're doing as we solve problems. But that's definitely a different mindset shift, and recognize that there's a potential to continue to contribute to significantly to our goals and working alongside the technology. So I mentioned about parametric design. I have no idea what that software is. Some of you may have used that. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm going to become the software engineer. No. What it does mean is that I don't have to become an expert in Grasshopper, but I certainly understand what it will allow me to do to be able to apply to the solution that I'm creating. The technology can enable us to accelerate how we problem solve, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's the second prediction. So what is my proposition? First, to level set. I'm sure you're familiar with many of these terms. Design thinking process, research-based design. I mean, you can kind of read through it. You may know some of these. You may already apply these in your design and classes and projects. But none of these are comprehensive on their own. So that's when the strategy enters. What is a strategy? I know you guys already kind of shared out some of that and the battle plan. I love that. It really is a plan of action for the future. And it really kind of takes all of the different processes that I just shared with you in a way that you can actually not only assess the current trends, anticipate the future and the challenges, and look for opportunities. I've had projects through the process with the client to pivot from, coming to us with that we want to do this project to when we do a deep dive, realize actually, you know what? We don't need to do this project and we're going to do something else. How do you get to that point, right? You are not going to get to that point that's much more strategic for the client by just doing the work that's coming to you or just the client presenting to you what the project is. You get to that point by asking the question of the why and why it's needed and how do we actually get there. Important factors here, you can see some of the skills that's highlighted here from strategy perspective is, yes, it does include creativity and innovation, critical thinking, and most importantly, problem solving. And it's really looking at the long-term goal as well. I'm gonna pause here just to check you're not falling asleep, but also if you have any questions so far. Okay, we can wait till the end. And I promise my lecture is not going to be as long as I think what's been allotted, 40, 45 minutes. So finally, I would like to walk you through 3 case studies that I've actually personally worked on, their projects, but not in depth, but at a level that you can actually understand what I mean when I apply strategic thinking, but also it was a strategy process that was involved. So first project, it was for Ally Financial. So started with a really small scale. They were starting to form a Scrum-based team model and organization within their IT. So we did a deep dive in a workshop setting to really uncover how do you work? If you're forming this new team, who are the players? Who needs to connect with who? When? How often? All of that, right? And what does that look like? What are you trying to achieve at the end of the day? Tell us. So we did sort of exploration workshop with the leadership to really better understand what does that mean? What kind of organization is it? What kind of team is it? So this is a diagram reflecting the outcome of that. Now, what's interesting to note is we've done millions and millions square feet renovation for Ally as a partner all over the country. From that little workshop, thinking strategically, asking the right question, we were able to create a space solution to pilot in one location and now has gone to be deployed across the entire enterprise. To me, it's not this physical environment that actually reached the goal, certainly, because that was part of the equation. But afterwards, we learned from the leadership stating that that exploration that we did with him actually helped him to uncover a lot of things and disconnect that he hadn't thought about forming this team, including who the talent needs to be. To me, that is the bigger takeaway in helping client achieve their goals. So that's one case study. Second one is for a client, Zeiss. It was a ground up building. They were bringing together multiple locations, different stakeholders to a single site location. They also had program that included office as well as the lab component that was highly technical. One of the discoveries and investigation that we did was to understand what is the relationship between the lab space and the office space. How are people utilizing both separately together? What should be the linkage that we need to support? The way we did that was by asking, how can this new facility actually help you achieve where you want to go from your organization perspective? Which one of the main thing was to drive the organization and the culture and how they work to be much more customer centric. What does that mean? So we had lots of discovery. We also did a lot of analysis and data gathering to understand the patterns of the work, the relationship. This is just one diagram of many information that we gathered, but ultimately it led to a facility that won many, many design awards. Kudos to our design team. I will not take credit for that. But again, here, my biggest takeaway is So we had the opportunity to create an environment that will not only enhance how people work between those two different, very distinctive typologies, but creating relationship, also enhancing the relationship to help better the process to put front and center. What does it mean to work to be customer centric with the customer in mind and that driving the flow within the building? So that's a second case study. The third one was for Google. Google came to us for their DC location, which was not very big. It's a lease space within a single building property. And they came to us with the challenge to think about a master plan that looks at real estate as part of the equation. Often when you do master plans, it's at a campus level, you're looking at multiple buildings, right? There's obviously landscape and other factors as well. But this was an interesting one to really think through the lens of understanding how people work, to the space implication and translation of that, and connecting it to what are the options from real estate perspective, because he really wanted to drive a decision-making for the future that also was informed by data. So that was a challenge. Now, many pages of data that we gathered and investigated, as well as modeling. So I certainly don't expect you to actually read through all the detail, but really the slide, the visualization is the point of our discovery and understanding how different teams within the organization worked very differently. And what does that mean to translate to a space solution? Now, within this translation, there was lots of numbers involved as well, because you want to be able to look at the next 10 years of growth trajectory. Who can actually project? I haven't met a single client that could project out their 10-year growth plan, right? Maybe the next year, right? Especially in this current environment that we're in, we're pivoting constantly, right? So how can we look back at the pattern? What's really going to impact their business in the future that might actually have one of these groups jump and increase their size, tenfold, right? Looking at all of those holistically. So there's creativity and data and analytics here. And when I say data, that's both quantitative and qualitative data that inform the solution. Another really fun visualization. So then it fed the model determined by many variables that we knew to be guiding the solution to understand the space solution and trajectory for the future. All this is really using a software that allows you to put the different variables that you need to look at to project out when they will actually run out of space within their current building. And based on when that is, and then also knowing how much more space they'll need, it will give us a guide on what that trajectory. Ultimately leading to the client, and this is obviously at a very high level because Google, lots of confidentiality, but really setting a really 3 distinctive viable path for them. What happens, pros and cons, if you were to do an interim plan and go to the campus model, or if you're splitting the campus now, we have to address this issue. Do you want to split it now? What are the implications if you just go find a new building immediately and put a plan together? Right? You might say this is not really design, but in my opinion, it really is a problem solving at a level that really takes advantage of all the tools at hand, applying the strategic thinking. So my proposition is that strategy, I believe, in the skill set and the mindset within that discipline, to me, has great opportunity to really elevate the design industry and what you do and how you do things in the future. And hopefully the case studies illustrated some of that at a high level. But what does that really mean? What does that framework mean? Now, I'll have a separate course on the strategy itself. Just kidding, maybe I'll get invited again. But I kind of laid out a few, I think, high-level categorical things that might be helpful to frame that out. And you may already be doing one or more of these things, which is great if you are.
Just decided where I'll frame that course in the fall.
Oh, okay. First and foremost, systems thinking mindset. And this is a mindset, as I talked about. Mindset are very different than skill set. You need both. What does that mean? You want to be able to look at the broad and big picture just as much as the detail at hand. You want to be able to look at the current state, the immediate problem, just as much as the long term, and see the implications of that. Okay. Second, I'm sure you heard it over and over again. This is a skill set that you can develop, analytics. Okay. Especially with the tools and technology and the software that allow us to look at data in a different way. As I mentioned to you before, more and more of our clients are not only demanding design decisions based on data, they're actually creating their in-house data solutions to create facility, real estate, design solution, you name it, environmental. Okay. And to me, this actually is not only the ability to gather data, understand what data is needed, and gather all the information, both quantitative, qualitative, but be able to translate to what are the trends, what does it mean, what do I do with it, and see the opportunity. This is where often our clients are challenged with today because they're inundated with the amount of different data sets. They don't know what's the right one to look at and why it should inform their decision. So we can be at the forefront of that. The third is the problem-solving skills. I know, I've used that term a lot, and design by definition, I'm sure you heard the term, it's a creative problem solving. Guess what? These problems are much more complex today, but you can actually harness the power to accelerate that with the opportunity we have on hand with technology. Now, within this realm, I challenge you to think about not only just problem solving, but asking the question, what is the right problem that you need to solve for, right? Often our clients, as I mentioned to you, they come to us, we want to do this with our project. Before you even answer how they might do that, you might want to ask why. Why is that a problem? Why do we need to do it? Right? What are other sort of underlying conditions and contexts and things that we can actually fold in to improve upon for you as a solution, as well as actually solving the problem, obviously, right? Not just asking the question. The fourth is a decision-making skill. This is probably one of the most challenging aspects when I do strategy work, because this is where you're going to take all of the information that you gather, be able to discern what's really important, and then what information you need to use to actually create the problem and create the solution. And making that sound decision it's also challenging, but also very exciting, especially when it's based on data and based on a business case you built through the analytics that you've done. The next one is communication skills. How many of you use ChatGPT, Copilot? Okay. In fact, this entire presentation was created by Copilot. Just kidding. It was not because, yes, it certainly helped me, but the power of storytelling cannot come from AI, right? It comes from us knowing, as I mentioned to you, all the skill sets, soft skill sets, empathy, who was my audience, even though I didn't do my research very well, engaging with people. How do I actually approach this problem? How do I want to present this? How is this effective to you? All of those can only come from human. And so storytelling is important because ultimately design is nothing if you can't sell it. I hope you all know that. I hope by the time you get out of the door here and you get a degree and go get a job, you cannot make any design solution come to life if you cannot sell it to your audience. So did I cover all the points? Okay, just checking. So I like to actually end by going back to the very beginning. And I don't mean the beginning of the presentation because that'll take another half an hour, but beginning of my journey. My first job at MBBJ out of graduating college, first project and first task was working on the Staples Center, lovingly now, I think coined as crypto.com arena. Okay. What's interesting about the story is when I think back on it, my first task, as I mentioned to you, was not designing the arena or the exterior. Certainly I worked on that as well, but was to look at the catwalk system when you look up. How should it be laid out? What are all the parts and pieces that has to work together, right? At first, when they put me on the task, I said, okay, this is going to be very boring. Has nothing to do with creativity. Certainly accepting that it's better than probably drawing, bathroom design or toilet layout. But what I didn't know was that it actually put me on a track to think systematically, strategically about a solution that requires understanding of different functionalities. What are the different events that people have to access up here to accommodate? What are all the different parts and pieces that has to be coordinated? Mind you, if you remember the rendering or the photo from the 2 slides ago, the roof is tilted, right? There's a human interface because there are workers that are working up and down the ladder, trying to sort of orchestrate what they need to do. On top of that, maintenance, coordinating conduits, mechanical, structural, you name it, right? It was a pretty complex problem. So I wasn't necessarily impressed with the Grammys that the arena hosted this year in February, but I was kind of in awe of what was invisible to majority of the people that were at the Grammys, which is when you look up everything that's at play above that actually helped to create that experience for the people. So I find this photo actually very beautiful. So while I can share with you lots of certainly other projects and beautiful environments and images and solutions that I helped to create, you can see all the beautiful photographs of all the projects that that was mentioned at my intro. Ultimately, I find this image to be the most better at representation of when I talk about my work. I don't know if any of you know what this is.
Relational table?
Yes, kind of, yes. You're probably speaking in terms of real technical word that I don't know because I really don't know the software. But this is actually a visualization of programming Grasshopper. Is that what you're referring to?
I was speaking on a database term. Go on.
Exactly, which I don't know. This was what was created working with our computational modeling expert to solve for entire city block real estate solution for Disney in Burbank. Now, I'm not showing you what that campus looks like. I'm showing you the inner workings of creating that solution, which to me, as I said, is much better representation of my work. So hopefully, and reflection of my work. So hopefully, all of that gave you some insight, some things to consider for now and future. Help you to think about not only the disruptions that are coming at us, but opportunities that we have on hand as designers for the future. And 15 minutes. Thank you. Then we stop sharing.
Yeah, stop sharing. And if anyone has any questions,
I'm gonna get there.
not, because I think Alexis is gonna have to repeat them into the microphone for the people on.
Okay.
There's something in the chat.
Let's see. Okay, great. And by the way, I came with an expectation. I was saying, Carl, maybe I might have 5 people that's attending. So I'm really happy for this turnout. And for your future reference, Carl, every time I speak, I make, even if I'm in a meeting, if I'm actually conducting a meeting at work, I ask everyone to shut their laptop. Because it's really important in this technological age to be present. So I really appreciate all of you doing that. Question back there?
Can you remind me what you said the text was to read about, like, the projection of the next couple of years? You said it earlier in your presentation.
Oh, the World Economic Forum report? Yes.
So when you were mentioning the progression of multiple disciplines and finding the correct question and solving for. What's your opinion on improving the teachings of multidisciplinary
Mm,
careers within school? That way, when we move into the workplace, we have a greater understanding of the workflow between all the disciplines we don't have knowledge of or don't understand fully.
yeah, that's a really good question. So I have a 16-year-old. He's a junior in high school. Gosh, that scares me. What I often ask him about is now, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to major when you go to college, which is like not very far for that matter. But what do you want to do? What are you passionate about? And then build a skill sets, as many different skill sets as you can, right? To me, when I look at some of the junior staff at work, people that are just joining our firm, Smith Group, I often get drawn to those that one, acknowledge I don't know everything. I certainly don't know everything. I know I'm up here talking to you, but I don't know everything, right? Have an open mind about learning as much as you can from everybody. I can be an engineer, graphic designer, or architecture. I even sometimes learn things from our marketing people, right? Two, it's about, again, having a mindset. How can I actually connect the dot as much as I can? That's no different than using the tools as well from technology perspective. The more you do that and pivot and continue to kind of evolve on your own in what's in your tool belt, right? I think you will uncover so many more different worlds where your career trajectory will go. And I encourage everyone to don't think about when you graduate, oh, I majored in architecture, I'm going to go to architectural company. Why? Why not? Strategic thinking, I think often, or designers, I'm thinking, whatever you call it, to me, my challenge is to design your own future. We do it on projects, but we don't do it or apply it in our own life. Why not? Right? I've done strategy session with my husband about our future. Case in point, right? Get a plan together. You may have to pivot many, many times, right? But create a plan. Why not? What is your problem you want to solve for yourself for the future, right? In your life, in your career. What's your career trajectory? I think the other opportunity we have with technology and this notion of like, sorry, I almost picked up the laptop. I can work from anywhere. Now, some industries, some tasks you cannot. I get that, right? But the mobility it allowed us actually opens up lots of doors, a lot more doors for us to be thinking about our career as not just kind of a job or a trajectory or a profession, but really, again, problem solving. What kind of problems do you want to solve and how do you want to solve them? Does that answer your question? Yes? Okay. Yes.
Curious, what projects you're working on currently. I really like that you people or case studies.
Mhm.
Worked on. Just curious if there's anything at least local or otherwise that you're involved in right now.
Yeah. So what's kind of sad actually, when I used to just do design primarily, I never got to see the built product at the end, which is kind of sad. But now it actually doesn't matter. But so right now, I'm actually working with a client I cannot name. It's a confidential client. We've actually been working with them since the beginning of the pandemic. Their location in actually Wisconsin, looking at actually a one building, and then we pivoted to look at their entire portfolio because of the pandemic and hybrid work and remote work. So we did an entire portfolio assessment for them, but now we're going to embark on looking at their one city location, Madison, because they have multiple properties there, to think about how can we reimagine space? What's the implication for future if we were to consolidate? What does it look like, and how does it help them achieve their sustainability goals? So it's actually quite an exciting project that I'm ready to jump on. There's also then smaller projects too as well, engaging with U of M or others. So yeah. Yes.
How much of the data is research that you or your colleagues are shaping and forming in terms of your own surveys, focus groups, that sort of thing, versus things that are just sort of being fed to you?
I would say depends on the project. And this is one thing about strategy when I try to explain what it is and the process, it's never the same every time because every problem is different. Every project scale is different. The duration is different. What do we need to solve for is different. So having said that, we always try to, the best projects are where we can actually balance both, where there's a lot of data in place that concrete data, meaning numbers, right? When you think about workplace environment, now people are the organizations are, they have badge data, visitor data, Outlook data for all their meeting patterns. I mean, you name it, these are real numbers, including their headcounts and the breakdown of that, the growth pattern and all of that, right? That's one set of data, certainly more concrete and quantitative. But we always try to add the nuance from the qualitative data, which only comes from either survey, engagement like workshops, and other ways, interviews, right? Which are, I always call them squishy data. But often that's probably the most important. I've had literally year and a half long project for International Monetary Fund. It was to look at their 2 building over 1 million square feet, trying to create a master space strategy for their 10-year plan. It was probably a dream job for me, but ultimately what really pushed the solution to be one direction versus the other was understanding and finding out and learning about their culture. Now, there's no data for that in numbers, right? But there were a lot of qualitative data that we were able to share in combination with the solid quantitative data to make sure the decision they're making was a balanced approach. Yes.
Something you said in your second prediction about shifting mindset from wanting to create something to wanting to solve problems.
Mhm.
Do you have any advice on designers who are like near the beginning of their career and how to start working on that? Because I know for me personally, I got into it because I like making things. I like solving problems as well, but how does one transition from one to the other? If you have any advice on that.
Good question. So I'm not saying that you don't create something, but I think the most important step on that journey is by asking, why am I doing this? I shared with you about a client that came to us with a project, and then after investigation, they pivoted, we don't need to do this project, right? That was done by asking first, why are you doing that? They were actually consolidating two groups together into one location. So why are you doing it? And then we actually investigated and uncover lots of things about 2 different groups, how they should come together. And there, of course, certainly there were other variables and factors we folded in, but ultimately there was really no benefit to bringing them together, right? So to me, it's about going in to face a problem or challenge. Maybe problem sounds really problematic, perhaps, but go in with an open mind and ask the right questions in the beginning without preemptively thinking, I want to create something for you. And sometimes it is creating something for them, but that creation of something also doesn't necessarily have to be what your discipline is. Is it a game? Is it a built environment? Or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a roadmap to go on a different trajectory. Maybe it's about organizational change. Maybe it's about some other things, right? I think keeping that open mind and guiding that conversation and providing enough information to, sort of narrate and create the journey for the client, the more you do that, I think the more discipline you build within yourself to problem solve, not just create.
So seeing creativity is at the top of your list. How do you try to harness your own creativity and how do you foster creativity?
Yeah. So to me, I don't know, personally, I see creativity, innovation very synonymously. And I think part of that is because I don't see creativity as something beautiful or certainly, sure, right? I'm still a designer at heart. But creativity might be on a project or based on the process. Like, what is the new idea that we haven't thought about? Is there an angle that we haven't really looked at it from, right? And what does that mean? What does that do? Because I worked on both, higher education or learning environments, all the way to cultural to workplace now. What I love is when the ideas can come from completely different outside the box, right? I might take an idea from learning environment to a workplace environment. I might take something from science and technology or healthcare. I'm always sort of mining for what other practices or markets or other disciplines are doing, because it gives me ideas and energy to think about not just what I always know and what I've always done, but to create something new, which is also why every time I start a project, a new project, obviously you want to be effective and efficient, but I challenge myself, do I just take the same path that I've always done, or is there a new opportunity to insert something else or do something in a different way to allow different creation? And I think that's how I see the definition of creativity and innovation. That's how often what I challenge my team to think about, not just look at, especially when you get into data analytics, you're just looking at numbers. But that can be, as I showed you some of the charts, data can be beautiful, right? It's really when you think about what is the purpose of it.
They may or may not see it. How do you reconcile that?
Mhm.
You know, sticking with your strategy while being more flexible with what time.
Very good question. So I think actually one of the benefits of doing strategic approach in designing something or coming up with a solution is because you're able to gather so many data, you're helping to create a business case to sell your idea, if that makes sense. When I mentioned to you about International Monetary Fund, there are a bunch of, sorry, no offense, economists. They work in numbers, everything is data. So they really needed, they wouldn't make any decision without seeing how is this backed up by data. So that was our approach. We did gather lots of data. These are what is actually telling you, both quantitative, qualitatively. So it actually made the decision-making so much easier, because you're not basing on, I'm going to show up to you and look at this beautiful space. Even when I used to do design work, right, interior and architecture, I remember I remember trying to, every time I want to present something, a concept, if it's a palette or your environment or 3D, right solution, I always think about how am I telling the story? It's not because, wow, doesn't it look beautiful? It's not green versus blue. It's not versus this ceiling versus that, or this panel versus that, but you have to sell this is why communication skills. I think about what's the story that I'm building around what I'm trying to say and what the design solution is. So then guess what? When you present it with the story that's backed up by data now, back then I wasn't, right? Backed up by data, it now all of a sudden, one, they have evidence to make a really clear decision. Sometimes it can be complex, but two, the minute I buy that story because you just backed it up, guess what? It becomes my story. It becomes their story, and they're going to be the one that's selling it for you. And sometimes that doesn't happen the first time, right? But I think the more, again, discipline of sort of guiding that process and honing your skill set to sell it, storytell, build up the story, the better off your outcome would be. Sure. Yes, Bill.
So I see kind of a crisis in architecture.
Mm,
And partly, me being with a large firm, there's different kinds of opportunities. So the strategic approach is kind of an organizational development,
mhm.
okay? And that's a different way of thinking about architecture than the run-of-the-mill firm that does strip malls, okay?
Right.
And so the vast majority of architecture is done in this sort of unglamorous way, not working with the World Bank or whatsoever. So I see the problem with architecture is going to embrace the strategic approach throughout the occupation of architecture.
Mm.
And so how do you translate this perspective into the more mundane work?
I like to answer that by saying, to me, the question is not whether this approach can really transform even those mundane firms. To me, the the question is, how can we actually build into our everyday life with this kind of approach and everything we do, whether it is you are doing a strip mall or not? To me, can it elevate you to do the strip mall at a level that's like none of the clients ever thought of? Maybe it will. It's not what it is at the end, but how you get there, but also ultimately, what goal are you actually setting up, not only for yourself, but for your clients with your product? To me, that's how I would answer that. Because certainly one of the things that we at Smith Group, when we do strategy work, we don't also do it or offer it to every client out there. And that's because, sure, I think it can help every client, every project, every client. I firmly believe that. But to me, the value of it is an expertise, different expertise that we provide. And recognizing that some clients either don't see the value, don't have the time or the money to pay for it. And ultimately, they won't really benefit from this process, because some problems, as you say, are much simpler, and that's fine. And that's something that we came to terms with, and because it's also not sustainable for us to be able to do this on every single project. It does not help the client, it does not help us. So it's really an opportunity to elevate what we do to the next level, and who are the clients and projects that we can do that with. That's how we actually target. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I wasn't thinking so much about it being a separate service,
Mhm.
but to have the strategic approach in everything.
Right.
And it's not a separate charge, it's a way that you go about doing architecture.
Yes.
And I see that as the future of architecture, whereas the model from 1940, design development, schematic,
Right.
these things where you toss it over the partition,
Right.
that's ridiculous.
And I will say, we're not the only firm doing strategy service. No different than there are consultants out there that have no business in design. They're actually owning design world as well. So there's disruption on the both end, but I do see a lot of more architectural companies that are thinking more strategically. They actually have internal strategy teams. Many are actually doing it as a consultancy and otherwise, but I think there is certainly a movement towards sort of harnessing this kind of approach.
Thanks for the presentation, kind of uncovering a lot of these workflows, but instead of the end results.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that because probably because I'm a grasshopper person.
Mm.
The kind of interesting thing, or I guess one question to the first part of your presentation was, as you kind of make the proposition that all these fields are more and more multidisciplinary, the sort of boundaries between positions are being more blurred, which kind of runs counter to most organizational tendencies wanting to say, oh, you are a certain type of person, a certain role. How do you see that evolving in the future to kind of describe this more, right, interdisciplinary roles that people might take on?
Yeah, so first, just to clarify, I think one of the facts that I shared is that we are more connected than ever. I didn't mean that to be that we're connected in multidisciplinary. Certainly I will answer that in the second part. It actually means that the problems that we're solving has a lot more implication and potential to, well, one, way more variables we have to consider, but on the outcome, opportunity to solve for many more things beyond just creating an environment or software, et cetera. So it was really alluding to that. Having said that, I do believe there has been decades of, even in the learning environment, thinking about how do we build teams and allow kids to work in teams, multidisciplinary, STEM, STEAM, you name it, right? The reason for that movement is because, as I said, I don't know everything. You don't know everything, but you have expertise and deep sort of discipline expertise in that one realm, right? Now, what happens when we connect? And, you just talked about grasshopper. I would love to talk to you afterwards. I will never be a grasshopper expert, but I would love to know what you might be doing that I don't know yet, right? It's this sort of connecting each other to learn from one another. To me, I wish we can all just be a sponge and learning, just soaking in everything, new things, different ways. Because I think if you don't do that, you're just going to be stagnant and you only know what you know. And you don't know what you don't know. And that's often the case of the clients as well. So to me, there's certainly a benefit. There are, Smith Group, we really profess and we practice interdisciplinary team. Engineers and technology, design, project management, you name it, right? Coming together. I would argue that most in the architectural world, that's coming together much tighter and faster, which is great. But now you got a folding construction side. What about on the front end? Funding certain projects. So we have a lot of sort of what we call upstream work with our client from urban design, talking to clients about how to get funding, developing cities. That's a very different also, end of the spectrum. We don't have experts. Some of us might. It's sort of bridging all of that sort of realm and connecting the dot. The more you can kind of expand and learn from one another, there will be benefit. Does that answer your question? Okay. I know we're past the hour.
I'll ask one more.
Okay.
And as a wrap up, and as Liz, thank you. And I took to heart, like, maybe I need to give more direction when people come to lecture, but you undermined that completely, because I am happy that we gave you no direction, because this was perfect. And
Well, I didn't ask either.
the quality of the questions and all the questions that are being asked speak to the way that you engage the audience and all of those things.
Great.
And maybe counter, while I agree with Bill and his take on things, I was curious if you could talk about the role that you have within strategy. Does seem like it's an additional service, as you mentioned, for complex clients, for other types of things. Is there a way, like, and I don't mean this as a criticism or a challenge, but like, are there scenarios where you justify that cost, or what's the data that comes out of that? Because I imagine there's aspects of you engage a client on the front end, you may be able to engage a client later on, and that leads to new projects, but also does it potentially save the client money, or puts the client on a different trajectory? Like some of those ways that, like, yes, it's an additional service, but here's some of those outcomes that might occur from that.
Sure. So I'll cover a few things for that question. One of the perhaps our differentiator for our strategy team is the group. We actually don't believe in, as Bill, you said, we do the strategy when handed off to the designer. We really believe in, as I talked about, multidisciplinary. That means when we do these engagement upfront, designers should be there. They should hear it firsthand. So when we do actually, transition to the later phases of what we're creating, they have the same knowledge base. They may not have the expertise, but they understand the story and where it generated from. So that is our philosophy. So it is an integrated process. Second, the reason that it is actually a specialized team. It is an expertise, no different than having engineers, structural engineers, and technical architect and designers. Is the reason for that recognition, because it is a different mindset and a skill set. But at the same time, because it's really about fundamentally approach, not a very kind of while there is a discipline in the process that we go through, it's very scalable. So that first case study I shared with you, it was actually one workshop for a client, right? All the way to the other client I shared with you for 1.5 years effort, that's like multiple engagements and data gathering. So we do scale it. And so often what we get into is actually when we get a project or client interested in, the first question is, what is the problem we're trying to solve for? Is there a role for us in that? And can we then customize and share that value to the client? And so if they accept it, yes, let's do it, right? Because it's not about, certainly at the end of the day, yes, we have to make money. But at the same time, if we see sometimes we see an opportunity to do a shorter engagement, and let's do an intensive approach to be able to actually have a strategic solution for the client, which then builds longer term relationship with them. And so those conversations do happen, and we do get engaged in many pursuits or determining what the right projects are. I'm also, yes, I'm part of the workplace strategy team at Smith Group. Different markets, they have their strategists as well. But I also always operate on, if you haven't noticed, I don't really stay in a box. So, you know, I'm always poking in, trying to collaborate with other discipline, other markets, and what are you doing? What are we doing? How can we help? And ultimately, I always do say every place is places of work. So that allows me to go anywhere. So just hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for staying after and for all the great questions.